As a longtime Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, I have capital O opinions about the rules of vampires. Today's 2021 release plays fast and loose with some of those rules, but ultimately hinges on the primary edict that sunlight kills them dead. Our provided review copy of The Hunger comes to us from publisher Renegade Games. Designer you may have heard of, Richard Garfield, submits this deck builder with some push your luck elements for the consideration of the Midnight Society. No, wait, sorry, wrong show. Let's get dangerous. Past our cover, the first thing that we're going to find is a frustratingly confusing rulebook, which is actually very deceptive because at first glance you'll see the 60-minute playtime and the only 8 pages and think, this is going to be a snap. Overall, you aren't wrong, but we'll get to that. Next up is the double-sided glossy finish board, which flipped over depending on desired difficulty. If we move these hunt boards out of the way, we'll find everything else hopefully neatly organized in their respective components. The individual player boards come in a plastic sleeve, and under those are the wooden player tokens. Here we have the mission tiles, hunt cards, starting player decks and roses, and the bonus and castle tokens. So far, so good. So let's set this one up. We're burning moonlight. The goal of the game. Each vampire, from 3 to 6 of them, is given 15 turns to hunt as much prey as they can, explore the town, make for the labyrinth to acquire a rose, and get back to the castle before dawn. The winner will be the player who accumulated the most victory points overnight. Expect the game to take about 15 to 20 minutes per player or so. Our first game with 4 players took nearly 2 hours, but a good chunk of that was a couple disagreements about how some of the cards worked. You'll start each turn with 3 cards in hand, which will determine your speed for that turn. If those cards add any draw or discard effects, that could be a lot or a little. Based on your total speed value, you can move that number of spaces or less in a single direction. Like so. If you choose not to spend all of your speed on movement, you can use the remainder to hunt from the board here, choosing a pile of cards based on the number denoted at the top of the board. Cards in the first column cost 3 speed to take, and the slower, more tired prey costs less as they're neglected by the other vamps. Hunted cards are scored based on any value in the top right corner, and then placed face up in your discard pile for later drawing. Flip your vampire token over to the face down side to denote that your turn is over, and pass play to the next bloodsucker. Too easy? Well, don't forget the ever-setting moon. After each full round of play, the moon will move 1 space to the right, edging ever closer to the deadly dawn. All your vampire tokens will ready themselves for the next turn. The hunted prey will slow down as they tire from the night's work, and new prey arrive on the scene. Repeat 14 more times, but remember that if you're caught outside the cemetery after your last turn, you're dusted. Let's start with the good. For fans of Clank, this is a natural successor. You're still deck building, still exploring, still pressing your luck, heading further and further away from safety before you decide you absolutely have to turn around. The change here in strategy is that you're spending your speed on accruing more cards. So the trade-off in travel means that you need to scrutinize your choices even more carefully. Waiting too long to hunt means that you could end up stuck with a stack of cards here in the 1 speed column that nobody wants. And that stack is just going to get bigger and bigger until the benefits outweigh the costs of diluting your deck beyond ever seeing some of those again. Some of these cards are permanent though, meaning that they don't get discarded at the end of your turn until you decide to use it, or even some never at all. The familiars add a neat level of planning, being able to stack up a pack of friends, using them only when they're most beneficial, and then hopefully getting them back 1 or 2 more times. Adding in these missions is another neat mechanic, incentivizing you to tailor your deck and or playstyle to a given theme or group of humans. Finding all the combinations available will take some doing though, so the replay value here is pretty high. If all of this has you positively drooling, go ahead and skip forward now, because the downside is a lot. Minor annoyances first. This double-sided board is glossy, which means that almost regardless of the lighting source in your room, you're going to have some issues seeing the board in some places. This is a big issue because the art on the board is relevant and sometimes very easy to miss that you're on a well location, which grants you an extra hunt. The other minor issue I'll mention is that these bonus tokens have an ability side and a 2-point side. But the rulebook very clearly states that you gain 2 points when you pick up the token, and you should flip it to the reverse side once you've used the ability. Now, this isn't really an issue, but you'll have to remember not to count these during endgame scoring if you do that. Whereas if you just didn't score them when you picked them up and scored them all at the endgame, it would make far more sense. There's literally no reason to score them right away. Where you are on the score tracker isn't used for mid-game tiebreakers or anything. Finally, my major gripe with the Hunger is one that will easily scare away some gamers. The card templating here is absolutely abysmal. There are lots of cards that cue off of having a human in your play area, but it's not immediately clear which cards are humans and which aren't. Adding even a keyword to each would have solved this with no issue. As it stands, you have to remember that humans have one of 4 symbols, which is different from one of the other 4 that you might come across. On top of that, there are a myriad of cards with X in the scoring drop, and it's not always clear what that evaluates to in any given scenario. For example, there's a subclass of card called Wolves, and at most of those have the text gain 1 at the end of the game for each wolf you have. However, there's also an X in the upper right corner, which signifies that you gain points when that creature is hunted. It turns out that you gain 1 for each wolf you've hunted thus far in your game at that point, so your first wolf is 1 point, the second would get you 2 when it's hunted, and so on. But there's no way you'd intuit that, and it's not clarified anywhere in the rulebook. When Richard Garfield introduced a little card game called Magic the Gathering in 1993, one of the main issues with it was also card templating and what exactly each of the cards intended to do. Nearly 30 years later, we're still having the same issues. The Hunger is ultimately a frustrating game to learn with some key problems that should never have made it out of production. Still, a committed player can unearth a very compelling game out of the box. Let's go through our checklist before I give you my final thoughts. In the box, rulebook clear and non-gender pronouns. The rulebook, despite being packed with information and having lots of clarification sections, is pretty opaque. It seems to do a good job at walking you through a turn and how to play, but once you actually start going, you're going to have a few questions that aren't immediately answered. It does, however, use non-gendered second-person pronouns you and yours throughout. Iconography clear. Not really. You'll want to keep the rulebook close by for at least your first couple games, and even then, you'll likely be referring back for edge cases and confusing card templating. Packaging well done. Yes, the insert has a place for everything, and while the box was clearly designed to be ready to hold expansion content, which I'm told is forthcoming, the extra space initially will mean that everything will float around a little bit, especially the tokens. On the table. Good representation. Of the 6 player characters, there are 3 women and 3 men. However, on the starting cards themselves, there's only 1 woman depicted, and she's currently the victim of a vampire bite. On the hunt cards, men outnumber women at nearly 2 to 1. Component quality, medium. The glossy finish on the board is nearly a completely unexplainable choice, but the card quality is decent and the wooden player markers are a good addition. The boards will hold up well over time, and the mission and bonus tokens are reasonably thick, though those are confusingly labeled. Replay value, high. Deck builders, by their very nature, afford themselves more varying strategy, and the Hunger is no exception. There's plenty of avenues to explore, both in exploration, and card management, so expect to be pulling this one off the shelf plenty of times with little repetitive feeling. Fun to lose. Often. While the majority of your points live in the deck you've crafted throughout the game, the bonuses for making it home aren't negligible and can easily be a difference maker. On the other side of the coin, pressing just a bit too hard and failing to make it to safety, being instantly incinerated just short of an easy win, can be soul-crushing. Fortunately, as vampires, you don't have a soul, save Angel and Spike, obviously. I desperately wanted to love the hunger, and while I strive for half a dozen or so plays for review games, I admittedly could only handle a couple for this one. The card templating and overall confusing interactions were just too much for me to overcome. It's maddening for me that Richard Garfield continually has some amazing designs and ideas that fail under their own weight. All that being said, if you can click with what's in the box easier than I did, I think there's a really satisfying alternative to Clank here. Somewhere. As always, I'm Nicholas, reminding you to help protect the game population, always sleeve your cards. Hey everyone, if you liked our video, please hit that sub button and ring the bell for notifications. Check out all of our other offerings at goodluckhighfive.com, and please consider becoming a patron of the channel over at patreon.com/GLHFmagic. It helps us keep making videos, reviews, and podcasts. You can become a member for any dollar amount. We're also always looking for new games to review. You can reach me at glhfnicholas@gmail.com. You can follow me, Captain N the Game Master, at CaptainNGM on Twitter and Instagram, and follow the channel at GLHF Magic. Remember, please shop at your local game store whenever possible. Until next time, I'm Nicholas, and good luck. High five.